Welcome to the Haunted History of Tennessee. This list of 10 is part of a playlist of gentle listening, spooky collections from across the USA. The screen fades to black so you can enjoy the stories without distractions if relaxing, studying or wanting to sleep. Please do consider a like and subscribe if you enjoy this type of content. First, we visit Greenwood Cemetery in Chattanooga. The main reported haunting is a bit different to usual ghosts and shadow forms. Whereas cemetery reports of ghosts might usually be of a woman floating along in a dress or a man in an old-time suit leaning against a tree, in Greenwood Cemetery, though, you might well see some tracks on the ground instead. Those tracks are made by a wheelchair, and it was once owned by a wealthy woman who lived across the nearby lake. As the story goes, the woman and her husband had been a happily married couple until she developed health problems. She became wheelchair-bound, and then he decided to cheat on her. Later, he killed her, and it's her ghost in the wheelchair that is seen in the cemetery. An extra twist is that she's not seen as herself, but as a green mist. A similar green shape has also been seen near the lake, though in those cases, the woman is seen walking along the shoreline. At number 2, we visit the Wheatland Plantation in Sevierville, Tennessee. At least, the plantation as it is now. The current house on the property is a replacement for the original, which burned down in 1825, taking the lives of 4 children. That event is the likely reason for so many reports of a childlike spirit in the basement of the new building. The plantation grounds themselves have witnessed dozens of people who have died on the property because it was a battle location during both the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. Also, slaves used on the plantation are buried on the grounds. There are nearly 70 burial places of those slaves, which raises an eyebrow when thinking about how many didn't die from simple natural causes. There's a mass grave for about 28 Cherokee Native Americans too, and a couple of graves for soldiers from the Revolutionary War. Some of the ghosts that haunt the property are from the Chandler family, who once owned and lived on the plantation. Investigators have captured what sounds like Native American chanting when doing a spirit box session. In the basement of the plantation, some people have sensed children being around. Another investigator reported that she had a difficult time breathing while in the basement and began crying uncontrollably for no apparent reason. It's really no surprise that people have seen ghosts all over the property. Third on our list is the Rotherwood Mansion in Kingsport. Located in East Tennessee, the mansion is almost 200 years old and was built by the Reverend Frederick Ross. It's haunted by his daughter, Rowena, who had a tragic life and still seems to be haunted by it herself. First, her soon-to-be husband died on the morning of their wedding, just before the ceremony. Another love interest died, and then her only child, a daughter. Rowena couldn't carry on and drowned herself in the lake on the property, which was where her first fiancé perished. Since then, she's haunted Rotherwood Mansion. People have seen her wandering around the property in a long flowing white dress. The property changed hands and was run by a slave owner, which brought extra spirits to the mansion and land. People have heard unnerving laughter after sundown, seen creepy eyes in the windows, and also witnessed a large black ghost dog, which howls as it roams the property. At number 4 is a very different location, a riverboat called the Delta Queen in Chattanooga. This very impressive paddle boat was built in the mid-1920s and received a recent $10 million refit for its role as a floating hotel. Efforts to gain an exemption for the wooden ship to cruise the waters has been successful, without it being fully fireproofed, and it's now allowed to sail, complete with its resident ghost captain. The spirit on the boat is Mary Becker Green, who was one of the USA's first female riverboat pilots. Although elderly and of small stature, she even helped to dock the boat on the evening when she passed away. In April 1949, Ma Green retired to her cabin on the Delta Queen and died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 79. Yet she's continued on as the captain in the afterlife. Crew members and passengers have shared encounters with a spirit believed to be Ma Green, who is known to haunt cabin 109. One of the more recent captains explained how he met his wife because of Ma Green. A new member of staff had heard an old woman calling out that she was cold and felt ill. The captain went to investigate and found nobody in the room. In fact, the roster showed the room should have been completely empty. When he returned from the room, the young woman was visibly frightened. She'd seen an elderly lady staring at her through a window. The captain offered to walk her back to her room, and along the way she saw a painting on a wall. "That's who I saw," she said. They later married, and have always said that Ma Green introduced them to each other. A very nice story. Halfway through the list, we arrive at the historic Reed House Hotel in Chattanooga. This particularly large and elegant hotel was first built in 1871 and rebuilt in a similar style in the late 1920s, reusing many pieces from the earlier version. Many naturally caused deaths are joined by murders and suicides, bringing several spirits to the hotel. The third floor is the main one for such events. The ghost of Annalisa Netherley is believed to haunt room 311, which is where her husband murdered her on finding out she was having an affair. Other rooms experience objects being moved in them, people see shadows in mirrors, and some have claimed to see what appears to be someone reclining on their bed. Other guests have claimed to see ghostly soldiers roaming the halls of the hotel's fourth floor, which may be residual energy from when the original hotel was used as a Civil War hospital. At number 6, we visit the Bethesda Church and Cemetery in Morristown. This place is said to have a huge amount of restless spirits who are seen wandering around, but they're not usually regular people from the local area. Instead, most are Confederate soldiers. One witness who was passing the cemetery and church on his way home in the small hours of the night saw what appeared to be a Confederate soldier who was swinging an old-fashioned lantern. Another witness said he saw 2 Confederate soldiers standing outside the church carrying on a conversation. When they seemed to spot the witness, they continued talking, but walked around the corner of the church, disappearing out of sight. There's also the ghost of a woman who appears to be crying at the far side of the cemetery. If you're there at night, there's a good chance you can hear her crying. At spot number 7 is the Carnton Plantation in Franklin. Carnton Plantation has the unusual feature of having a front porch that overlooks a graveyard. In that graveyard are about 1,700 Confederate troops who were buried after a bloody battle was fought nearby. Shortly after the burials, the mansion was transformed into a hospital for more casualties of the war and was where 4 generals died. Staff held on to their bodies rather than burying them straight away so that survivors would be able to pay their respects later. That history may explain why so many witnesses have seen the ghosts of Confederate soldiers roaming around the mansion and its grounds. However, there are several other ghosts at Carnton Mansion too. They include the spirits of the Carntons' children, since only 2 of them from 5 survived into adulthood. Also, a young woman who was murdered by a jealous suitor, the ghost of the family cook, and a beautiful woman with long dark hair. At number 8 we have Hales Bar Marina and Dam in Gold. Construction of the marina and dam along the Tennessee River began in 1905 but took 8 years to complete. It was intended to be a power plant, but would also help to control a natural whirlpool. Local Native American tribes were not happy at all about it being constructed and put a curse on the dam. This was in addition to a curse put on the original land, 20 million acres of which had been sold earlier. Construction proved difficult. 4 different companies were used to try to complete the work, and throughout the 8 years it took to build, many deaths of labourers occurred. Visitors, staff and paranormal groups have all reported a variety of paranormal activity, which includes Native American war cries, chanting and seeing dark figures, which all could be linked back to the curse. There's also an apparition of a little girl in a pink dress who is said to have drowned there. It's said that her remains are still trapped in the concrete dam, which would explain why she's been unable to rest. For number 9, let's go to the Old Trinity Church in Mason. The church has had a rough history, being the focal point of a satanic cult in the 1930s and 40s who desecrated the place. A caretaker took matters into his own hands when vandals also repeatedly attacked the church and its grounds. He created crude booby traps, installed tripwires and wires at neck height to stop such vandalism. What may be related to those attempts is that now, according to local beliefs, there's a statue of the Virgin Mary marking a prominent grave in the graveyard which often drips blood from its neck and eyes. Those who visit report strange lights and noises believed to be coming from the spirits distressed about the destruction of their graves. Finally, we visit the Pegram family cemetery in Pegram, and this place is definitely in the oh my god wide eyes category. In 1970, a group of developers bulldozed an area along the Harpeth River while working on a housing development. However, as they made their way along, they also destroyed the Pegram family cemetery. The land was flattened and houses were built on it. 5 years later, the river flooded and all the homes on the land were flooded. During that flood, coffins that hadn't been relocated floated up and out of the flattened grave areas into people's yards. Since then, the town has had nothing but bad luck, with financial hardships and flooding being regular problems. Some homeowners will occasionally see tombstones appearing and disappearing in their gardens. The land is often considered to be cursed, with an overall feeling of unrest and malice lingering. Thank you for joining me on this little journey from floating hotels to floating coffins. Tennessee has some quirky tales from within the state. I hope you'll be here for the next one. Texas.